Hi guys. So we will be talking about how do we build any football with. So I think a lot of people see a lot of this on social media. You might see now on Instagram or any kind of social media. You see a lot of football with. You may see it may range from a simple graph such as how many goals you've scored, a player has scored, or it may even range to I don't know very very complicated graphs where you see a player making the passes a player makes, the goals, the assists, and a lot of stuff. But we'll start off with what I think are a basics. I would say not very I would say the base level, but let's say it's like you start from a level above, right? Assuming that people who watch this video know at least have an idea of running code on Jupyter notebook like I'm doing right now. So let's start off first. The three libraries I'm going to discuss are going to be Pandas, Matplotlib, and MPL Soccer. So these three libraries are really important. When we talk about any football with, but I mean, anyone who wants to start on this path, they should be proficient with this. It's as simple as that. So, let's start with Pandas first. So, Pandas is the library that you use for any data frame object. So, what are data frame objects? It's like, in simple words, you can say it as a table, right? So, if you got an Excel sheet with, let's say, a lot of rows, right? Maybe a player name or different metrics, you can just read them using pandas into the Jupyter notebook, right? I mean, any information you have can be CSV files, Excel files, or you can even read a table that's in the website as well, right? Pandas is the most important library. So let's start with pandas. So I've got uh, a CSV file that has Borussia Dortmund's events, right? Some of the games, not all the games, but some of the games this season. So let's start with that. Let's start off. So yeah, assuming like I already said, the basic level of Python, you import pandas as PD. So you wanna import any library in pandas, you use the word import, right? Import pandas as PD. PD is like a short form. It's easier to use it. And then with this PD, there's a function called read CSV. Now this read CSV is really useful in reading any CSV file. So generally, what I'm reading here is even data files. So even data files contain each and every action that's made in the match. So generally, they are available in CSV or Excel files. Right? You find um, any of them lying around, generally you find them CSV or Excel files. So pandas, the read CSV function, you're giving the name of the file, you can give the path of the file. I'm reading the file from the folder where my Python is. So we're directly reading the file name without the path. Let's run that. Now pandas gives an option to set the maximum number of columns, the maximum number of rows you want to set. So let's start, let's say like this data file has approximately, I think, right about 50,000 rows and I don't know, around 150 to 200 columns. So obviously you don't want to see all that data, but at least you want to see the number of columns you have or the maximum number of columns you have. So let's execute this. Let's say I'm setting the option to display a maximum number of columns 300 and the maximum number of rows 500. Right, that's what set option looks. Now, so we read the word BVB. So to the variable BVB, we have assigned the events of Borussia Dortmund. So let's look at how it looks like. So this is how an event data looks like. You got event ID, minute and second of the game. You got which team makes events, it's home or away. You got X and Y. Now these coordinates specify the location of any action, right? So now this is a game between, I think, Borussia Dortmund and Bayer Leverkusen this season. 2022-2023 season. Let's say we look at some of the actions. We look at Ezequiel Palacios, for example. He makes a successful pass from a location of these coordinates to a location, the index and y, to these coordinates. So how do we plot this? I'll show you later. But this is how event data looks like. You have lots of actions, passes, ball recoveries, every action. You see a player making a pitch that's recorded with coordinates of where the action is made. I think a better way to look at this, let's look at the columns, right? So pandas data frame allows you to access the columns, right? All you need to do is take the data frame you have. Let's say you have BVB, this is your data frame, this was what you assigned, right? You read a CSV file using pandas. We can just say dot columns. So we use the dot operator, right? It's the most important, I'd say, operator in pandas. You want to access the columns and get it into a list. And I would say just use function toolist. Right, that's great. So you got a lot of columns, right? Not all columns are really, useful all the times. Some generally the X and Y coordinates and the type which you would say is the action that is made, whether it's a pass, ball recovery, or a shot, or anything. So those I think are the most important ones you'll be using generally, right? So these are the columns you have in a typical data frame. You have a lot of columns to check if pass is forward, it's left, it's right, it's a key pass long, where it's a long ball that's key pass, where it's short pass that's key, so on and so forth. A lot of columns. Now let's see the unique type. So like I said before, you have a dot operator. You can access anything in your pandas data frame. So your data frame BVB, right? This has something called type, right? So what type does is you have the column type right here. So to access a column, you just call the name of that column inside a bracket, square brackets for the data frame. Let's say unique gives you the unique set of types that are there in the BVB data frame. So let's look at that. So yeah, now we can see the various type we have. So we have start, we have pass, we have if a foul is made, takeoffs, tackles, where the shot is saved, where it's a goal, where the pass was offside, whether it was interceptions, a lot of actions. Like I said before, you only choose the actions that are relevant at the point of time you're making any data viz. So um let's make something from these data. So to make something from the data, first and foremost, let's filter out only the Borussia Dortmund events. So I'm not interested in the events that other teams make. So a lot of opponents for Borussia Dortmund over the season. Example, the first game is Bayer Leverkusen, they're the opponents. Then you have Union Berlin, they are the opponents in another game. Right, so we don't want what Union Berlin does on pitch. I only want the events that Dortmund does. So how do we separate that? We can separate it this way. Let's just say, let's name the new data frame as BVB only Dortmund events. And then we take the data frame, and then in the square bracket, right? Square bracket is used to access or filter or do a lot of operations, right? So in this case, I was able to access the unique types of BVB, the data frame. So now I want to filter only the Borussia.NET action. So each action, when it's made, there's a team ID attached, right? So which team makes the action is attached, right? So in this case, for example, the home, it shows home or away, and the team ID. So if the team ID is 44, home or away is home. So who is home team? We got that information. We got, okay, so Borussia Dortmund is home team, and an action made by the home team, comes under the team ID 44. So Borussia Dortmund has the team ID 44. So all we have to do is, let's just go to data frame. In the square brackets, we just have to say my team ID is 44. I only need the actions for that. Run it, and yeah, now we got a much smaller data frame, right? So I think this one had 43,000 rows, right? The whole data frame. But now when I have filtered only for the actions that Borussia Dortmund have made, I've got right about 20,000. So I've just, let's say I've halved the amount of action. Right, I've halved it. Now let's say I want to plot who made the most passes, right? Let's say I want to plot who made the most passes amongst Borussia Dortmund players. So now this is where Pandas, is very useful right now. How do you want to find out that, right? Which players? So let's say I want the list of top 5 players that made the most passes for Borussia Dortmund. So what I do, first thing, let's just filter the passes. How we filter the passes? The same way we filter the team ID. Take the data frame, inside the curly brackets, just put the type is pass, right? So we have different unique types here, all the unique types. Just choose pass, put that here. So you got only the passes that Dortmund made, right? So the other actions are not even there. So let's say Dortmund made about, I don't know, in this events, in the file that I got, you have about 15,625 passes Dortmund made, right? Of course, I'm on the top 5 list, right? So how do we sort anything, from with using pandas data frame, you got a function called group by. Right, so what this group by does is it groups with respect to a column, right? So now let's say since I want the top 5 players that made the most passes in Borussia Dortmund, so I'm going to group by on the player name, right? So player name is the column that tells you which player made which action. So you got column called player names, you got the player names here, Mohamed Dahoud, Gregor Kobel, Mats Hummels, all the Dortmund players. Right, now I'm gonna aggregate, by aggregate I mean I'm gonna count, right, I'm gonna group all the players and say count the number of actions that they made, or count the type. So in this case, my type is only pass alone, right? Because why? Because I filtered. Sorry, it's here. I filtered the data frame only for passes. So if I look at BVB passes and say type in the square brackets and say give me the unique ones, it only says pass. So there's only passes. So what I'm going to count essentially is I'm counting the number of passes aggregated and grouped by and with respect to each and every player name. Right, so when I do that, if I run this, let's say I sort the value in a descending order, meaning it comes from the most passes to least. Right, so sort values is a useful function that you can sort the values whether ascending or descending. You just start naming the column type and say ascending, false or true, whether you want it in ascending or descending order. So let's just run this. Good. Now we see our list of players. So that says Nico Schlotterbeck made 1,882 passes, the most, followed by Rafael Guerrero, 1,409, Niklas Süle, 1,365, so on, so forth. You got whole list, you got every player that ever appeared for Borussia Dortmund, all the passes that we made last season. Now let's say I only want now let's say I'm going to reset the index. So now right now the index is the player name, right? So generally when you see a column like this below the another column, right, you see a name like this, it generally means that your index is this column, right? So we don't want player name as index. We're not going to go after, we're not going to use that as the index. So all we do is, this is the same thing, right? The same statement comes up here, right? We're just going to use the dot operator and use a function called reset index. So what reset index does is it just resets the index. So you're not going to have player name as the index anymore. You're going to have numbers, right? So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. You're just basically assigning a column with a row of numbers that is gonna tell you, that's how you're gonna access the pandas data frame. So let's do that. Let's reset the index. So this data frame, I'm calling it as passes. right? Now let's say head in the sense. So what does head mean? Head gives you the number of entries you want to appear from a data frame. So what I mean is, if this is passes, this data frame, this table is passes. So if I say I only want the first 5 entries, I just say passes or header 5 says got the first 5 entries, right? So let's say we're only looking at the top 5 players that we need. Like we only need to plot the top 5 players. So let's say we only want those players. So only take those. So let's rename passes as, or let's assign the first 5 entries alone to the passes to pass itself. So let's say passes is now only the first 5 entries. Right, so head is used to get the first 5 entries for any data frame. Right, so on the first 5 you can like give any number here. Right? You can, let's say I'm on the first 10 entries, get the first entry 0 to 9. Only 2 entries, get 2, 1, 3, so on, so forth. Right. We'll see that's first 5 entries. Now, matplotlib. So let's start with matplotlib. Okay, so the first and foremost important thing I want to start off here is put a simple graph using matplotlib that shows the top 5 passes where the players, right, the top 5 players that played the most passes for BVB Dortmund last season. So to do that, let's say I want to make an attractive graph where I show the number of passes players made, and let's say I want to add an image, right? So there are 2 ways here. There's a library called PIL, right, Python Image Library, from which you can import a library called image. What this image does is it opens any image you download in any format, right? So let's say I have an image of Schlotterbeck, Nico Schlotterbeck in my folder that says, right, which without a background obviously to put in the graph. Yeah, so like I said, I have an image of Nico Schlotterbeck. So Schlotterbeck was the player that made the most number of passes for Borussia Dortmund. So let's say I've got an image of the guy. Let's say this is the image I have. Right, so this guy, it's an image without the background, obviously. So now we're gonna put this image on a graph and say Nico Schlotterbeck made the most number of passes. So how do we do that with the library called matplotlib? Let's see that. Right, so let's come back here. Okay, so like I was talking about the Python image library, right, it helps you to open any image. All you have to do is just put the path for the image. That's it, smooth. You can just put the image name and say, right, we got Nico Schlotterbeck here. This is the image. There's also another way to open images. I'll show that to you later, right? But for right now, you can go to Google, you can go to any website, you can just download player images, maybe preferably from the league website, right? So now let's say I want to see who made the most number of passes from Dortmund. So let's import a library called matplotlib.pyplot as plt, right? Matplotlib.pyplot. So this, right, it's very big, so we're just shortening it as plt. So matplotlib is a very useful library in plotting images, plotting any type of graphs you want. So let's say a figure, the name of the figure is called fig. Let's put an axis to it and say plt.subplot. So basically what I'm trying to do here is I'm naming the figure and an axis and defining it using the plt library and saying subplots. Right, so what this subplots does is it provides space, like essentially to plot on an axis x, and the whole thing, the figure, will be called fig. Now let's use the axis, right? So we got the data frame from before. We got passes, so we got the top 5 layers that made the most number of passes for Borussia Dortmund, right? So what are we gonna do? What we're gonna do is just plot that on a bar plot. So how do you plot a bar plot? So we're gonna use the axis ax and function called bar h. So bar h essentially mean horizontal bars, right? Horizontal bars, right? And in the horizontal bars, let's say the x-axis, or in this case, this would be the y-axis, the x and y reverse. So let's say put the player name, passes, the column player name here, passes, and the column name type. Right? The type is nothing but the number of passes. Right, now let's say if you don't want the word type to appear, let's say I want it like pass count or something, you want to change the name, you can do that easily. You can just say passes columns, like probably name, and just say put the old name and let's just say the new name. Right, so you can name this as, oh my god, with that it is rename corps, sorry, my bad. Yeah, so now we just renamed it to from type to pass count. Right, so this way we just save it. Let's just save it in the pass name again. So now we got the passes data frame. Instead of type, you now have pass counts. A simple function called rename. Inside of rename, we're saying the columns that we want to rename. Which column do you want to rename? Type column into the old name is type. I want to give a new name saying pass count. Right? So coming back to this, so we're going to player name. Right now type doesn't exist, so we don't have to put pass count. Right, I'm gonna set a title saying most passes played for BVB. Top 5 most passes played. Now I'm gonna set an X label saying passes, or let's set the label for the bar that shows the passes as number of passes. Right, now if you want to add an image to the axis or a diagram you make, all you have to do is fig.addAxis, right? In the brackets, you're gonna have to give a specific set of numbers. Now, these numbers are not always determinable, but you just have to adjust based on how we place the image. So I'll show you an example. Right, let's just run this now. Let's say I put a new axis, right, by calling the add axis function. I'm saying imshow, right? The function imshow shows an image, right? So we're gonna put these three, and let's say axis is off. So I don't want to show the axis, the new one that I built. Let's just run it. Right, so now you got a diagram, right? So now you can see you got Nico Slaughterback's image plotted on with against his name as the most number of passes. Right, now let's say you wanna maybe change, or maybe you wanna add the rest of images, or maybe let's say you wanna move the player a little bit inwards. So when I talked about the numbers in this, these are useful in the orientation of the image. So if I, let's say, change this to 1.2, the player moves inside. So this is like how you adjust, the orientation on how you want. Maybe you don't, maybe you want him at the beginning here. Let's reduce it so he's here. Maybe you wanna put him in the end. Let's do that as well. Yep. So these numbers are essentially the way have you set the axis. Now, of course, similar way you're gonna have to add. You can add other axes and add other images. So let me show you one more way to add images, which will be taking the URL of an image and getting that image. So I'll teach you that. Let's say I want to add Rafael Guerrero's image right here. So what I do is I use image.open. Now I need, let's say I don't have Rafael Guerrero's image ready, right? So I want to read the image from somewhere in the net. Let's say, let's search for Rafael Guerrero. Got his images, right? Let's say Dortmund. Let's look for PNG image. Should be easy that way. So you got an image here, for example, right? This is a good image, right? So it's a PNG, doesn't have a background. And let's just right click on this image and say copy image address, right? So when you copy image address, what you do is, let's go back to notebook. Let's just say I want to read the image from this website onto my notebook. So what I do, I use another library inside the open function called URL open. So there is a library called URL lib, inside which you have requests, right? Import URL open. Right now, what URL open does is it opens the URL. Simple as that. It opens, gives you the image. Let's say I put the image here. This was the image address we copied from this website. One was one. Let's just say we run it now. Right. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So sorry about that. Use URL lib the request. From the request library, you can get URL open. So now look at IMG6. which is what I named this, right? This is what I named. I'm going to say image.open, the website link where I took from the image address. Let's run it, let's check it. Voila. So now we got Rafael Guerrero, the image of Rafael Guerrero from this website onto my notebook. Now let's just add another axis and add his image. Let's name it axis 4. Let's say IMG6. Right. Now I've got, let's take a little bit, like I said, let's adjust the numbers. Yep, his image is too high, but let's bring him down. Yep, so now I've got Rafael Guerrero as well into the images. Now maybe I wanna make this more legible, so let's say I want to increase the fix size. So what fix size does is it increases the size of the image. Maybe this is not really legible, you can't see much. Do this, now I've got a bigger graph, right? Now see the place better. Maybe I can shift Rafael Guerrero a bit to the left. Yeah, now that looks good, right? Similarly, on Nick the Sula, Jude Bellingham, Google them, get their images, use the URL open. Of course, do remember URL open sometimes. You might not work at all websites, right? But this one website is a good one versus one. This website is good, it works always. I recommend you to use that website to get any images or any graph you're making. Okay, now let's dive into MPL software next.